My name is Gayleen Gray, Assistant Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at McMaster University, and I'm really excited today to introduce you to Stephanie Koehl. She is our June 2020 Women in Tech Changemaker for McMaster University. Welcome to you, Stephanie.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's really exciting for me to be able to talk to you. You're our first student, now alumna, who is taking on this mantle of being the Women in Tech Changemaker as part of our overall series. And we're thrilled that you've accepted the opportunity to represent the institution in this role. And I'm curious a little bit for you, when you heard about this program and the initiative, what were your thoughts? What do you think about being a Women in Tech Changemaker?
Yeah, well, I think being a change maker has kind of sort of two components to it. So I think one, being a change maker really in any industry requires that you have, a mission that has some energy and ambition and excitement behind it, that when people hear about it, it resonates with them and that they, they're excited about it. But I think it also has to do with this kind of small, consistent change in order to achieve that goal. And I think that's something that I've struggled with in initiatives in the past, is you have this really exciting initiative and you want to put your all into it. But then often you get burnt out, or, if you get off of the habit of putting in effort, it becomes really hard to get the momentum back. So I think it's really important to, with any initiative that you're doing, being a woman in tech change maker, being, as I am, starting this electric airplane company, or, directing a hackathon. It's all about, doing small things every day or every week, or whatever the timeline of your project is, to make sure that you don't get burnt out, and that you can bring that consistent energy to the project. I mean, I guess something everyone can resonate with is having your own personal development goals. If you want to exercise more every day or read every day, I've had this goal for years about wanting to read more, and before I used to set these big goals that I was going to read a half an hour or an hour every day, and it would be so overwhelming. But now I have this new strategy that I read 2 pages every night before bed at least, and I can do that even on my most tired, exhausted day. I can commit to that.
I think that's a really exciting way of looking at things, bringing things down to bite-sized chunks and being able to accomplish your goals, taking things one step at a time. I think that makes a lot of sense. And you've had an extremely busy number of years. You've been a student, and you started up Skyvolt, and I want to learn a little bit more about that. One of the things I thought was really interesting that my communications manager pointed out was that you sort of embody our McMaster IT strategic plan, which is all about a connected campus, a seamless foundation, and transformative technologies. And you've had an opportunity to stay connected with people through mentorship and your involvement in communities. You've built around your educational career a really interesting hybrid of programs that have given you, I think, a good foundation for building a startup and moving forward into the world around technology. And then, of course, the transformative technology piece, which is Skyvolt. And I think all of those things are really exciting and really interesting to me, how they reflect some of what we believe we're trying to bring to the campus from a McMaster IT strategic plan perspective. I'm wondering if you can talk, I want to learn a little bit about your startup, Skyvolt, and I'm sure other people would be really interested in that. And maybe we can get to that in a minute. I want to talk about that piece around mentorship and leadership, though, because when you think about building things out in chunks, getting support and being part of a community and leading yourself and leading others are so important. So could you talk a little bit about your mentorship activities and what leadership and mentorship has meant to you as you've gone through the last number of years as a student?
Yeah, I remember I was chatting with a friend while I was preparing for this about what leadership means to various people in my life. And I have a friend of mine who owns a business, and he has various employees. And I asked if he thinks he's a leader, and he's like, well, I don't give motivational speeches every day. I don't, incite all this excitement in people. I don't think I'm a leader. And I think that's a common misconception, that being a leader is like being this motivational speaker who, gets people to do these things that they could never do without, I don't know, the inspiration. But I think being a leader is just, you can be a leader in anything. You can be a leader in, motivating a friend, or you can be a leader in, I don't know, like sharing a book with a friend, or, in your classroom, raising your hand to ask a question that everyone else is too scared to ask. You can be a leader in a lot of different things. And I think, I think it's important to be a leader in everyday things. And in my own life, I've tried to take a very kind of an approach where I'm not that motivational leader, but I'm someone that is there to provide support when people need it. But I also have a lot of trust in the people that I hire in my teams, or I recruit to organizations that I'm part of, and I let them kind of be free to do the things that they want to do. And I had written in my profile about a really influential leader to me, one of my my first computer science professor at McMaster, Dr. Christopher Anand. He just let me, be myself. He let me, explore interests that I was interested in, and gave me the support to pursue those things, gave me books to read or papers to read, or, had very long conversations with me about future research projects we could take on. And I think that's kind of the leadership style that I've tried to take on, is just letting people be who they want to be, and not kind of sticking them into a box of, this is what I need for my team, so this is who you need to be. It's I think it's a lot more beneficial, and you get kind of some surprising things when you let people do what they want to do, and it ends up helping you in the long run.
Well, it's clearly had a huge impact on you. I love the story of your professor who was a leader, but also a mentor, and somebody who really did help you to explore new things, it sounds like, and that you must have had a level of curiosity that you brought with you when you came to McMaster to allow you to explore different areas of study, as well as to experiment and explore different directions that you wanted to take that educational background into. So tell us a little bit about how all of that transpired into you with a startup. I think that's really fascinating as a student, that you had, first of all, the energy, being so busy, but just the idea, and then the ability to take ideas and turn them into action. How did that come about?
I thought maybe one day I would explore entrepreneurship. It would maybe be a software company, but it would be much further down the line. But I'd always been a huge fan of Tesla, and it was my dream to work there. My entire, undergrad, it was working towards moving to California and getting a job at Tesla. And as I started to get older, I realized like how sad it was going to be to leave all my friends, leave my whole network that I had here, and leave a country that I loved living in just to find meaningful work. So that was kind of in the back of my head. And also, I just had this idea of building an electric airplane as a hobby project with my dad. It was going to be, this 10 or 15-year project that we would casually chip away at. And I was telling friends about the idea, and they were so excited about it. There was like so much, I don't know, just like people really wanted to be a part of it. And I realized that, maybe this is something that I can bring people on just to work on. Maybe I would make a university club or team out of it. And then I was chatting with one of my friends who worked at the Forge, which is McMaster's business incubator. And she was chatting about if I could make a business plan that I could get some funding, and they would be able to help me make it into a business. And maybe this could be an avenue for me to pursue meaningful work that I really wanted to, without having to leave the country, and pursuing kind of these leadership opportunities that I had loved so much in undergrad. Like every club or team that I was a part of, I always wanted to work my way up and be in a leadership role, because I really thrived in those roles, and I loved being in kind of a mentorship kind of role. So I was going through, they have kind of a business school that you go through when you get into the program. I had to pitch in front of 400 people, which was very scary. And I realized that I maybe had a decent shot of making this into a company. I was connected with all the right people. I knew lots of people in engineering from my undergrad and the clubs and teams that I was part of. I had lots of connections in the aerospace industry, either from family, friends, or from the Forge was really well connected to aerospace. And it was very nerve-wracking to think of myself as an entrepreneur, as so many women in tech, or just people in general, struggle with this sense of imposter syndrome. But I decided that regardless of how the company panned out, I was going to learn a lot in the process, and it was just going to be kind of a fun project that I could work on with my friends. So there really was no losing in this scenario. So I decided to go for it. And I've written in my profile as well, I've been so surprised at how supportive people have been. I gave a short presentation at this conference in Germany, this huge aerospace conference, and I was surprised at how many people were very encouraging and offering advice and help. And the same thing happened at the Forge. We had this meeting with a bunch of aerospace executives, which was very daunting, and people were giving a lot of encouragement. And I thought people were just going to be like, that's crazy, why are you even attempting that? But I think sometimes we're the thing that stands in our own way the most. So that's been a huge learning opportunity for me. And so we've taken it a lot farther than I've ever thought. We've just purchased like a 2,000 square foot build facility. We're in chats with an investor. I've built out a team of 4 full-time employees now. So it's very exciting. And if I wouldn't have taken that first step of just saying like, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I'm just going to try. If I hadn't have done that, then none of this would have happened. So I think it's really important to not be afraid to fail. Or you can be afraid to fail, but at least go with it anyways.
Yeah, still go. That's great. I think that's wonderful advice to pass on to people who are first just starting off in their educational experience, because I think a lot of people come into their university experience with a pretty clear path, but lots of things happen along the way, don't they? And that can change people's minds on what their outcomes may end up being. So if you were able to give advice to new students who are joining McMaster, what kind of advice might you give them? If you thought back to yourself 4 years ago, what kind of advice do you think you'd like to pass back to yourself at the start?
Yeah. I think I was so afraid of joining clubs and teams that I wasn't like qualified for. I was so scared of just like not being let in, or people being like, why are you here? But if you have hobbies or you have interests, university is the perfect environment to kind of test out the waters on those things. And to kind of sit with those feelings of imposter syndrome, or am I qualified or adequate enough to be going after these things, and trying to like assess the validity in that, and trying to see if you can push yourself out of your comfort zone and just try these things, because you'll probably learn something in the process, whether it be learning through a club or team, or just learning to deal with rejection. You're going to learn something regardless, so just go for it.
Yeah, I think that's really great experience for our new students. And as you know, we're just at that start of the summer where people are starting to put their minds towards their arrival in McMaster and what that's going to mean for them. So that'll be wonderful information to share. I'm wondering if, as we close up, you might think about yourself 10 years from now, and what you could imagine for yourself, Stephanie. And do you have any thoughts about where you might be 10 years from now? And perhaps you can provide yourself some advice from 10 years into the future. What would you tell yourself now as you're embarking upon this wonderful new opportunity with Skyhold?
Yeah. 10 years from now, oh my goodness, I have absolutely no idea. And
do you think maybe you and Elon Musk will be business partners? That's possible, right? You could do the plane wing. He'll be still in the car.
That would be lovely. That would be lovely. Elon Musk is definitely one of my role models. So if he's watching this, I'm open.
We'll make sure he gets the chance to see it.
But yeah, I mean, I think, I used to have these plans for where my life was going to be, and obviously none of them have gone even remotely close to where I thought I would be. And I'm happy with where I am rather than, this plan of where I really wanted to be. So I think, as long as I continue this mentality of not being afraid to fail, of going after things that I'm interested in and not settling for, status or money or whatever it is, realizing that there are things that are more important to have the sense of fulfillment, the sense of pride in the things that you've gone after is so much more important than that. So I hope I continue that on 10 years from now. I hope I'm still pursuing new crazy opportunities, and yeah.
That's wonderful. I think you're giving great wisdom to women and women who want to be change makers in technology sector, but also to everybody, because you're right, life is it's a fascinating journey and we don't want to limit ourselves. So you have very good wisdom to share, and thank you for sharing it. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I really am going to encourage everyone who's listened to this to take the time to read your profile as well, the one that you've developed for our Women in Tech Changemaker series. It's beautiful. You did a wonderful job, and we're really, really thrilled to have you as part of our series. So thank you so much, Stephanie, and we wish you wonderful success. I have no doubt that you will achieve all of your dreams, plus many more you haven't even dreamt yet. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. That's so kind of you.
It was a pleasure.